Thanks for watching. My name is Mike Dunham. I am an attorney. I've been practicing in the metro Atlanta area for over 20 years. I've done a lot of family law cases. What I want to cover today is not necessarily specific to Georgia law, but I'm a Georgia attorney, so I'll be coming at it from that place.
I'm Pat Fenner. I'll be helping Mike present this tool that he's created for attorneys and those having to figure out overnights for a parenting plan. Mike, tell us about it. Why did you put this together? What was your reasoning?
So, first and foremost, I do want to say that this video might be watched by either lawyers or non-lawyers because I think it's applicable to both. But just for the non-lawyers out there, a little quick history. Child support in Georgia used to be very simple to calculate. It led to some results that people didn't necessarily like, but it used to be just however many children you had, the non-custodial parent paid a certain percentage of his or her income, and that was how we got child support. And then there was a series of factors that you could argue about, maybe get a deviation that the court would come up with, but that was basically all it said. And then about 18 years ago in 2007, we moved to a shared income model. And what that means is that we're actually taking into account how much both parents earn to try and figure out what child support ought to be. And if you think about it logically, if you have two parents, two sets of parents, and let's say dad is the non-custodial parent in both cases, and let's say dad's income is the same, and he makes, let's say, $75,000 a year. And then in one case, mom doesn't work or works part-time and she makes less than $20,000 a year. But in the other case, mom makes $200,000 a year because she's an executive or something. The old statute would have required the same child support in both cases because all you're looking at is dad's income. So now we have a shared income model that looks at both incomes, and it's a more complicated calculation. And we have a computerized tool that does this, but it basically takes into account both incomes. It looks up how much the quote unquote basic child support obligation ought to be on a giant table somewhere. And then whatever the share of that income the non-custodial parent has, he or she pays that share of the basic child support obligation as his or her child support. So that's how it's been for the last almost 20 years. But recently, there have been more changes, more tweaks, more refinements to the law. Now, what we're looking at is the amount of parenting time the non-custodial parent gets. So again, taking your sort of hypothetical two sets of parents situations, two families, let's say that mom makes the same income, dad makes the same income. In both of them, the non-custodial parent is dad. But let's say in one of those, dad has every other weekend and that's it. And in the other one, it's more of a 50-50 situation where dad has every other week. If dad is paying the same child support in both of those situations, you can argue that's not necessarily fair because dad is shouldering more expenses when he has more time. So the effort is to try and calculate how many days that the non-custodial parent has so that we can adjust his or her child support to account for that. And so that's what brought us to this place. The parenting plan will spell out what the time is. Obviously, you need that because that spells out what the rules are, who gets what time. The biggest thing that usually impacts most parenting plans for obvious reasons is what is the school calendar affecting the children? You may have more than one school calendar if the kids are in different schools. We're going to assume, to keep from tearing all our hair out, that all the kids are in the same school district and have the same school calendar. But then you also will need some sort of tool to actually go through and count the days. The basic, very high level overview of the process that we have to use here in Georgia, and this will apply in any other state where it's true that you have to do this, is we have to count how many days each parent gets across a 2-year period and then take the average of those to get an annual total. The first thing you have to do is figure out what are the 2 years you're going to look at. It might make the most sense to do calendar years and go from January 1 to December 31. In my opinion, that isn't quite as convenient because you're coming in the middle of a school year and then capturing an entire school year and then ending before the end of the third school year. And so to me, it's a lot easier to assume something closer to or that will overlap with the school years themselves. So I personally use August 1st. Usually the schools where I am practicing will start in the early part of August. So if I start on August 1st, that'll capture 2 school years and the summers after them.
Okay. Now, if there's kids with different schedules, you would need the school calendars from both schools.
That's true, but let me say it depends. If the kids are in different schools and have different schedules, then you may need to do this twice. If the kids are in a split parenting situation, then you may need to do this twice. Once for mom as the custodial parent of the children she has, once for dad as the custodial parent of the children he has. But generally speaking, if you have, I would say that the most common situation is all the children are kept together and will be primarily with one parent most of the time, even if they're different ages, even if they're in different schools. So if you have a high schooler and a middle schooler, but they're in the same school district, they're generally following the same calendar. They live primarily, let's say, with mom. Dad usually is going to have them at the same time, even though school starts and stops on a different day or a different time of the day. Generally speaking, they're going to be in the same place. You probably only need to do this once, even though there's multiple children.
Mike, what kind of examples are already available for working this out?
So when this first came to pass, they actually told us about a couple of tools that are available actually put on in other states, and we're just using those. The fact that they're with other states doesn't impact anything because all you're doing is counting time. It's just that those states have had these tools longer, so they have them and we can use them. So a couple of examples of these that we've been told to use. There's one from Minnesota, from the DHS there, and you can see what it looks like on the screen. And you can put in your parents' names. I'm going to choose Ellen and Clark. And then remember I said I generally like starting in August. So I'm going to start with August 1st of this year and have it generate the calendar. And you get them in a tool that looks like this. And there are some tools where you can populate quickly. So if we were, let's say that we wanted to do dad's schedule instead. So we'll go to Clark and then we'll say, let's say every other, and let's say he gets the weekends. So we're just going to give him Friday and Saturday, and you can hit populate. You can see it populates all of those very quickly. And then let's say they've decided their weekend starts on Thursday. So you can do that. And again, just have it do that way. But you also have the ability to come in here and do whatever you want. So for example, September 1st was of 2025 was Labor Day that year. Let's say that Clark gets Labor Day in odd numbered years. So you could go through and assign that to him. So you can go through and assign whatever dates you want on this. And then we can flip over, if we're happy with that, flip over to Ellen and say, assign the rest of the dates to this parent. And it will do that automatically. And then what you get is a calculation that's happening in real time. And you can see it here on the left side of the screen, where it's calculating how many overnights each parent has. The key number for, at least for Georgia, is that we need to calculate what are the yearly average overnights. And just real quick, why are we using 2 years? And the reason is because very often you have holidays that are flip-flopped from one year to the next. So dad might get Thanksgiving every even year and mom might get Thanksgiving every odd year. So by using 2 years in a row, you're getting an even year and an odd year, and you capture all of those and you get an average that way. And of course, obviously I've skipped a bunch of steps because I haven't gone through and calculated all the holidays and done all of that. You will do that by clicking each box on and off to get the schedule exactly right. And we'll talk through in a minute what you actually need to look through to make sure that you're counting everything. That's how this tool works. So just as another quick example, they've also given us as an option, this is the child support parenting time calculator that Oregon has given us. And this one is a little more programmatic in nature. What I mean by that is they're walking you through what is the regular weekly schedule for each week. And they say they have some options here, first and third, second and fourth, alternating odd, alternating even. There's not an option for a fifth weekend here. So it's a little bit cumbersome. Let's say that he gets 2 weeks of uninterrupted time. And then you have all these holidays that you can pick, but only these that are on the list. So we'll give him MLK Day and President's Day, and we'll just alternate through those just for illustration purposes. And we'll do it that way. And then winter break, they don't bother putting that one in there. Spring break, let's give him spring break in the even years. And then you have to hit populate calendars for both. And so then it goes through and it counts or puts check boxes next to some of these days. And when you get all the way to the bottom it has totaled how many days parent A and parent B get in each of these years. But then you have to click this button to compute average parenting time, and it calculates it both in overnights and in percentages. So here again, if Clark is parent B, then this number that it's calculated is what you want. And if you need to print this, you can. It will print 12 pages of stuff, and the one piece of information you need is on page 12. So that's how that tool works. So I don't like all the clicky boxes. I don't like the lack of flexibility. I just don't like either one of these tools. So I created my own.
All right, that's a perfect segue. So show us what you have. This is on an Excel spreadsheet.
That's correct. This is basic Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, whatever the current version is as of October 2025 when we're recording this. I will say I'm on a Mac, but I don't think that matters. This might even work on like Google Sheets or Numbers or some other spreadsheet program also. But all I do was I fill in the top here where it says Griswold v. Griswold. The non-custodial parent we're going to say is Clark. And then again, I like starting in August. So we're going to start on August 1st, 2025, which is a side-by-side two sort of ribbon style calendar where it's got the entire year in one column in a nice, tight, compact format. And what you'll see is at the bottom, we're totaling the number of overnights in year one, the number in year two, and the average. Since that's all we really care about, that's all I'm looking for with this tool. And the way you do that is pretty dead simple. All I'm doing is filling in a 1 for every overnight that we're assigning to Clark. So if we come up here and we're saying, let's say that he has Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then, so he picks up the kids after school on Thursday, returns them to school Monday morning. So he'll have those 4 overnights. So we fill in a 1 for each of those. And then if we want to copy that forward so that we have that every other weekend, we can just copy and paste. So you can see here where we filled in every other weekend. I haven't bothered with the holidays or anything like that. What that shows you is that he got 106 overnights in year one, 106 in year two, the average. I never do math in public, but I can do that. But Excel calculated as 106 average annual overnights. So that's the number that I need for the child support parenting time adjustment calculation, which is a little bit of a mouthful.
All right, we just need pretty much that bottom number is what we were looking for, right?
That's exactly right. And all of these, the Minnesota tool, the Oregon tool, this spreadsheet tool, these are simply ways to get to the same place, which is how do we come up with the average annual overnights that the non-custodial parent has? That's the number we need. So we've looked at 3 ways to do this using the computer, 2 online tools that are completely different, but both work the same in terms of getting you the number you need. And then an Excel spreadsheet tool that I happen to like better because if I print it, it all prints on one page. So it's a much easier and cleaner way to look at it, in my opinion. But again, the point is to get that one number and to be able to show how you did it. If you wanted to print out a calendar for 2 years and go through with a highlighter or a Sharpie or whatever and circle those on the paper and then count them by hand, that's perfectly legitimate too. You would just need to be able to show your work so that if your numbers are ever challenged, you can explain to the judge how you came up with them.
You're counting the dates based on where the child wakes up.
That's correct. We're looking at who has this child overnight. The statute says overnights because that's what we're counting. So if we're talking about a situation where, let's say this is a common thing, especially in a situation like this, where you have Clark has them every other weekend on this Thursday before mom's weekend, maybe he gets a dinner visit or something. He gets to pick him up from school, keep him for a while, do some homework, take him to soccer practice, have dinner with him, and then bring him back to mom that afternoon or that evening. He's not keeping him overnight. That's not going to count.
Oh, okay. And this may be an obvious question, but this only needs to be done once too, because this is for the non-custodial parent, correct?
Correct. We just need that one number for the parenting time. What we're really looking at, we're not even looking at the schedule here. We're just using the schedule to figure out this number. What we're really going for is a way to come up with what the parenting time adjustment should be for Clark's child support.
Okay, great. So we have to take that number and I'm assuming we'll need to plug it in somewhere else.
That's right. And that's a little out of scope for what we're doing today. But there's a tool that we have right now later on after the first of the year, 2026. The online child support worksheet that we use here in Georgia will include that information automatically. We're still going to need this piece of information though. So we still need to come up with a way to get this information ourselves. This process is tedious, having to enter all these ones in, and all we've
Yeah.
really done here is chart out all the weekends,
Mm.
right? We have not accounted for summer vacation. We have not accounted for Christmas, Thanksgiving holidays, fall break, spring break, Easter, any of those holidays that the parents might want to share. Very often, parents will come up with a list of holidays that they want to share so that they will, in most cases, probably share them back and forth with each other so that one parent will get the children for, let's say, Thanksgiving in even numbered years, and one parent will get the children for Thanksgiving in odd numbered years. We would want to account for all of those things here because those are going to adjust our totals.
Okay.
Other examples of that are things like Mother's Day. Generally speaking, so for this one right here, the schedule happens to have landed because Sunday, the second Sunday in May, happens to have landed in Ellen's favor for our example here. But if you look at year number 2 over here, the second Sunday is May 9th of 2027, and that one, the pattern landed on Clark. So we would want to make sure that we zero that out so that Ellen got that. Or it
Yeah.
may be that the parents agree that she can have the entire Mother's Day weekend. Maybe she likes to travel, and maybe there's a provision in there where Clark gets another weekend to make up. Those sorts of adjustments need to be made throughout the entire 2-year calendar to make sure that you're getting an accurate count of how many overnights Clark is supposed to have. So to do that, you have to look at everything in turn. You have to look at the regular parenting time schedule, whatever they're doing week to week or every other week or whatever. Then you have to look at the specific holidays that they've allocated. Then you have to look at the summer. Sometimes there's conflict there because you might have a provision that requires that each parent gets 2 uninterrupted weeks in the summer, but then there's also going to be a provision where dad always gets Father's Day. So we have to make sure those don't conflict. So it can take a while to work all the way through that. And in my opinion, now that we have artificial intelligence tools available to us, I think AI can do that in a much cleaner way, a much more efficient way, and in a way that saves lawyers their sanity, which works a lot faster and therefore hopefully saves their clients a little bit of money. I've come to discover that the version of AI that we have right now anyway is very garbage in, garbage out. The better the prompts that you give it, the better the output it will give you back. So I have a prompt that I use. You can tweak and adjust as you may see fit. But this one tends to work well for me. We're going to make that available to everybody. So my AI of choice these days is ChatGPT. I'm still, to be perfectly candid, I am not an expert. I'm still learning how to use it. I think most of us are probably not experts. I did hear somebody say not that long ago to me, you might as well learn how to use it now because the version that exists now is the worst version that is ever going to exist. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I'm going to give you the prompt that I use and the tools that I use for that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually give ChatGPT 2 things. One is the school calendar, which you can usually download from the school's website. And the other is the parenting plan itself or a version of it.
Okay.
I want to take a minute to talk about that. There are serious questions about the ethics of uploading parenting plans and those sorts of documents, especially if they're draft documents, to the ChatGPT. And I am sensitive to those concerns. So I want to show you something that I've done real quick on the parenting plan.
The school calendar, of course, is public information, so there's nothing controversial about that. But the parenting plan is a legal document.
That's right. And you bring up a good point. Let's just look at the school calendar so you can see what I uploaded. This is a copy of the school calendar that I used. I am based in Cobb County, so I've set my example in Cobb County, Georgia. This is the Cobb County, Georgia school year calendar at a glance for this particular school year. One quick note, this is a little bit technical, but this calendar has to actually be readable. So if this is a scan of something, then it won't be readable. This one, you can actually select the text in it. So make sure that the calendar that you're using would include this. So this is the parenting plan that we use. Now note that I've used Ellen and Clark Griswold. Sharp-eyed observers might know that this is a fictional family. This is, of course, the family from the National Lampoon Vacation movies. I've included their children's name as Rusty and Audrey, just for the purpose of seeing this example. And that's a little tongue in cheek for this video, but the point is you can take your draft parenting plan and do a search and replace of all of the names in it for fake names. And I think there's nothing wrong with uploading a proposed draft parenting plan that has fake names that isn't tied to your client at all to ChatGPT. The other thing, of course, is anything that is filed with the court becomes public record. There may or may not be restrictions in place on online access, but generally speaking, unless there's a order sealing a particular file from public access, which is very rare in Georgia, then a filed document is public record anyway, and I'm not sure there's any confidentiality concerns that you would have there. So
Okay.
it is something to be aware of, but I don't think that the ethics concerns are all that great when we're talking about a draft document that I've created where I've replaced all of the names in it with fake names. So for this, while I've got it on the screen, I'm going to show you, I've taken a somewhat unusual, or at least less common example. In this particular case, I have a split parenting arrangement where dad has primary custody of the party's son and mom has primary custody of the party's daughter. Now, in this situation, we would need to do two calendars. We would need to do one that shows dad's time with Audrey because we're calculating non-custodial parenting time. And then we would need to show mom's time with Rusty for the same reason. So we would have to do two different calendars. And the same thing that I said before, in terms of making sure we've got all of the holidays and Father's Day and Mother's Day allocated correctly and all of those sorts of things, you have to allocate all of those correctly to make sure that we're calculating accurate numbers to be used later.
Okay.
So we'll get back over to the ChatGPT example in a minute, but this is the prompt I'm using. And so I want you to notice that we've asked the machine to review the parenting plan and the school calendar and then analyze both of them together. Now, we only have the school calendar for 1 year. This is pretty common. Sometimes you can get future years, but that's not always the case. So I don't know that necessarily matters. I think generally speaking, schools don't make radical changes to their calendars or how they do it from 1 year to the next. There are exceptions, of course. And if you know those exceptions, then you have to account for that. But I think if you only have 1 year's calendar available to you, I think it's perfectly okay to extrapolate what the next year's calendar would be. So I've asked ChatGPT to do that. Analyze these documents and figure out how many overnights each parent has with the children per year based on an average of 2 years. I've chosen my start date of August 1st, 2025. Then you can see that last sentence. Assume the school district will follow the same basic pattern for determining the first day of school, the last day of school, all holidays and school-free days for both years covered by the analysis. So that's the prompt that I'm going to use.
And this is basically something you can literally copy and paste every time you have to figure this out.
Yep. The only thing I might have to do is change the date.
Oh, yes. And you need the school calendar, the parenting plan, and this prompt.
That's right. So you can see here, we had uploaded the sample school calendar. We had uploaded the draft of the parenting plan. And then now I've copied and pasted the prompt into the ChatGPT window, and I'll just hit submit. But the other thing to keep in mind about those online tools is you can't save your work. If you ever need to go back and do it again, you're hunting and clicking all of these little boxes 730 more times. So as you can see, it says it thought for 1 minute and 37 seconds. Pause on that for just a second. I don't think we could have used any of the tools we've covered so far as quickly as that. And it spells out all of the math that it did here. And then it tells you exactly and walks you through what it did. It explains why the numbers hold. It started with the regular weeks, talked about Thanksgiving and winter vacation, and then other holidays, then moved on to summer vacation. And then it figured out leap day and odd day effects. So I don't think we have a leap day in this particular window, but it is accounting for that. But the bottom line is right up here, per child per year. So for Rusty, mom has 78 or 79 nights. And for Audrey, dad has 78 or 79 nights. So those are the numbers you're using. 78, 78 and a half, or 79, pick one. You're going to be pretty close. And it's just telling you how you did it. It is also telling you, if you're thinking, wow, that sounds very symmetrical. It even told you right here, symmetry is expected. Each parent has one child on school nights for about 4 nights a week, and they alternate full kid weekends, meaning both children are together with one parent or the other. So that across both kids, each parent averages the same. And if you're wondering why this came out different than the example that I did with the Excel spreadsheet where it said 106, that's because we were using weekends that might have been longer than what's in this parenting plan. If this parenting plan started weekends on Thursdays instead of Fridays, or ended them on Sundays instead of Monday morning, then we might have different numbers, and that's what that'll give you.
So if you needed to justify how you came up with the number in the plan, is this something you could print and use as a justification for how we got the dates?
Like any good lawyer, the answer to that question is it depends, because you're asking if it's admissible, and that is up to the judge. If you have a judge that isn't going to accept this, then there's not much I can do about that. And trying to convince a judge that this is acceptable might be a little bit out of scope for this video. But to me, this tool and this way of doing things is no better or worse than going through a paper calendar with a Sharpie, or going through the Minnesota tool or the Oregon tool or my spreadsheet tool and doing this one at a time that way. I tend to find that the machines are a little more infallible than we are, but they're not perfect and it can make mistakes. And if you ran the same thing over and over again, maybe it comes up with different numbers. I don't think it will. I don't think they'll be wildly different, but I will say that if I were needing to pitch this in court because the other side just wouldn't agree to this, then I would be comfortable printing this out and saying, AI gave me this, and I don't think it's that far off base if it is off at all. And so these are the numbers that I think you should use, and let the judge do whatever he wants with it.
So we will have access to these in the description. And of course, every tool has its glitches and gotchas. Do you want to go over a couple of things that people should be careful of as they're working through this?
Sure, there are always potential issues with how your parenting plans are drafted. So if the parenting plan is confusing, the AI may get confused. I would suggest that if that's a problem, then your client and or the other side may get confused as well. So I think the only fix for that is to make sure the drafting is tightened up. The other issues, quite frankly, are all human created. So I don't expect the AI to mimic them.
Mm.
But if you are using one of the other tools, then you have to remember to make sure you start alternating weekends with the correct weekend. If the parenting plan says that, you have to make sure that you're not miscounting weekend days. So if the child is to be returned on Sunday evening, then that Sunday overnight needs not to be counted. You need to make sure that you don't skip any holidays, school days, or expected school free days. Make sure that summer time is properly accounted for. That can be tricky if you have rules where you have the weekend schedule continuing through the summer, let's say, but then one parent or each parent gets a bonus week that they can set aside for themselves, that sort of thing. So that can be a little bit tricky. Then all you can do is do the best you can, making sure you go through the plan and making sure you go through the calendar one day, 1 week, one section at a time to make sure that you're doing the best you can to make sure you assign the right days to the right parent.
And every once in a while, you get those teacher workshop days they don't announce in advance. How do you account for those odd day school holidays?
There again, I think you are looking at the language of your plan. That's more of a drafting issue than anything else. So if you look at the school calendar itself, and we can flip over to that real quick. If you're looking at the school calendar itself, you can see, and there's various color codings and all of this that it has on there, but there's one, all these yellow days are designated as student holiday staff day. So those are designated days off, so to speak. So for example, November 4th happens to be election day. That's a common teacher workday selection in a lot of districts. And that's a day where the staff has to report, but the kids do not. Point is, that is one that's planned or scheduled. And so that's one you can account for somehow. I don't think in 23 years I've seen a parenting plan that allocates election day, but I have seen them that allocate school free days. And so a lot of times the schedule, a parenting plan will say that whoever's weekend that was, if there's a school free day on Monday, then that parent can keep the kid for another day. So you do have to account for that. Those are the ones you know about. Of course, you can have things like snow days. Those obviously can't be scheduled in advance.
Right.
And so usually what will happen is that the parent who has the kid for that day anyway will just continue to have a kid for that day. There's nothing that will provide that the other parent has to take him or has the right to take him or anything like that. Then it'll be just that parent's responsibility to provide childcare if they need to, even if they need to work that day. And of course, what we always hope as practitioners is that the parents are going to talk to each other and are in a place where they can co-parent effectively
Mm.
by working those sorts of things out between themselves. But we also recognize that not everybody can do that. Whatever your process is, choose whatever works best for you. I'm a big believer in the best tool being the one you'll use. So I'm not here to advocate for or against AI. I do think that AI is so new that a lot of practitioners might be either afraid of it or just unaware of what it may be able to do for us. So the point of this video is not to walk anybody through how to use a particular tool. It's just to show what a particular tool could do. And if you get any value out of this because you can adopt AI into your practice that way, great. If you are a non-lawyer who's trying to figure out how to do these sorts of things, this can be a time saver for you. But I do also want to encourage everybody to get a lawyer involved. These are complicated things.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Mike, for putting together both the video and this tool.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Bye bye.